The morning bell rang at 5:30, just like it had every single day for the past 47 years. Sister Catherine opened her eyes in the small, simple room that had been her home since she was 24 years old. Now out 71. Her joints creaked as she sat up on the narrow bed, her gray hair hidden beneath. The white cap she wore even while sleeping, as she walked down the long hallway toward the chapel for morning prayers. Her footsteps echoed against the stone walls, but there was another sound that made her heart skip a beat every single morning. The sound of silence coming from the main hall where the piano sat. That beautiful black Steinway grand piano had been the center of so many wonderful evenings in the past. Sister Catherine could still remember the first time she saw it. 20 years ago, when a wealthy family donated it to the convent, she had run her fingers along its smooth surface, feeling the familiar excitement that only musicians understand. Then, things were different. The old Mother Superior, Sister Rose, had encouraged the nuns to use their talents for God's glory. Every evening after dinner, Sister Catherine would sit at that piano and fill the entire convent with music. Chopin, Bach, Mozart. The classical pieces she had learned as a young girl flowed from her fingers like water from a spring. The other nuns would gather around, their tired faces lighting up as the music washed over them. Sister Anne would close her eyes and sway gently. Sister Mary would smile, her knitting needles moving in rhythm with the melodies. Even the youngest nuns, fresh from the outside world, would find peace in those evening concerts. Sister Catherine had not always been a nun. Before she took her vows, she was simply Catherine Walsh, a promising young pianist from Boston. Parents had spent their life savings on piano lessons, dreaming that their daughter might one day perform in the great concert halls of the world. And she was good, really good. At 18, she had won the state piano competition. 20, she was accepted to study at the prestigious New England Conservatory. Her teacher, Professor Williams, told her parents that Catherine had the talent to become a professional concert pianist. She has something special, he had said, a gift that comes along once in a generation. But life had other plans. During her second year at the conservatory, Catherine began questioning everything. The competitive world of classical music felt empty to her. She watched other students scheme and fight for opportunities, and it broke her heart. One evening, after a particularly brutal masterclass where students were pitted against each other, Catherine walked into a small church near campus. The moment she stepped inside, she felt a peace she had never experienced before. The elderly priest, Father Thomas, was practicing hymns on an old upright piano. His playing was simple, not technically perfect like hers, but it was filled with something she had been searching for, pure joy and devotion. They talked for hours that night. Father Thomas told her about Sister Rose's convent, where nuns lived simple lives dedicated to helping others. Music is a gift from God, he had said. The question is, how do you want to use that gift? 6 months later, Catherine left the conservatory and entered St. Benedict's convent. Her parents were heartbroken. Her music teacher was furious, but Catherine felt, for the first time in her life, that she was exactly where she belonged. For 27 beautiful years, she had been able to combine her two loves, her faith and her music. The piano became her way of praying, her way of bringing joy to her sisters, her way of serving God. Then everything changed 3 years ago when Mother Superior Rose passed away peacefully in her sleep. Sister Catherine had played Mozart's Requiem. At her funeral, tears streaming down her face as she said goodbye to the woman who had understood her so completely. The new Mother Superior, Sister Agnes, came from a much stricter convent in Vermont. She was younger than Sister Catherine, only 55, but her face was already lined with the severity of someone who believed that the path to heaven was paved with suffering and sacrifice. Sister Agnes's first announcement came just 1 week after she arrived. From now on, she had declared during evening prayers, there will be no more music in this convent. Music is a worldly pleasure that distracts us from our true purpose, prayer and service to God. Sister Catherine felt her heart break into 1,000 pieces. She raised her hand timidly. But Mother Superior music has been part of our evening prayers for decades. It brings us closer to silence, Sister Agnes had snapped. I will not hear arguments about this decision. The piano will remain in the main hall, but it is not to be touched. Is that understood?" The other nuns had looked at Sister Catherine with sympathy, but none dared to speak. In their world, the Mother Superior's word was law. That first night, after the announcement, Sister Catherine had lain in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her fingers moved unconsciously, playing invisible melodies on her blanket. She could hear the music in her head, every note, every chord, every delicate phrase, but she could no longer bring it to life. The weeks that followed were torture. Every morning, she walked past the piano, now covered with a white sheet, like a ghost. Every evening, when the time came for what used to be her concert hour, the hall remained silent except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock. Her hands, once graceful and strong from hours of practice, began to change. The calluses on her fingertips, built up over decades of playing, slowly disappeared. Her fingers became stiff from the manual labor that now filled her days, scrubbing floors, washing dishes, tending the vegetable garden. Sister Catherine threw herself into work, hoping it would distract her from the music that still played constantly in her mind. She would knead bread while mentally playing Bach's Goldberg variations. She would weed the garden while her fingers silently moved. Through Chopin's nocturnes, the other nuns noticed the change in her. Sister Anne, who had been her closest friend for 20 years, would often find Sister Catherine staring at the covered piano with tears in her eyes. "I miss our evening concerts," Sister Anne whispered one day while they folded laundry together. "So do I," Sister Catherine replied quietly. "So do I." The months turned into years, and Sister Catherine aged rapidly.
Ow.
The sparkle in her eyes dimmed. Her back became more hunched from bending over cleaning supplies instead of sitting proudly. At a piano bench, her hands, once her greatest treasure, became rough and swollen from harsh cleaning chemicals. But the music never left her mind. Late at night, when she was sure everyone was asleep, she would sometimes sneak down to the main hall and sit on the piano bench without touching the keys. She would close her eyes and play entire concerts in her imagination, her fingers hovering just inches above the keyboard. During these secret midnight visits, she would remember her life before the convent, the applause after a perfect performance, the feeling of the keys responding to her touch, the way music could make time stop completely. She would remember Sister Rose's encouraging smile during those evening concerts, and the peaceful faces of her sister nuns as they listened. Those memories were all she had left of the life she had once lived, when she was not just Sister Catherine, the cleaning lady, but Sister Catherine, the pianist, a woman whose gift had brought joy to everyone around her. But as she sat there in the darkness, surrounded by the silence that had become her constant companion, she wondered if she would ever play again. Would her fingers remember how to dance across the keys? Would the music still flow through her after 3 long years of forced silence? Little did she know that soon, very soon, she would get the chance to find out. The winter nights were the hardest. When the snow fell thick outside the convent windows and the world seemed wrapped in silence, Sister Catherine would lie awake listening to the wind. But beneath the howling of the storm, she could hear something else: music. Always music. It had been 2 years since Mother Superior Agnes had forbidden anyone to touch the piano, and Sister Catherine was slowly going mad. Not the kind of madness that makes people scream or break things, but the quiet kind that eats away at your soul, piece by piece, every night. She would try to pray herself to sleep, but her mind would wander to melodies. She would find herself humming softly under her breath, then catch herself and stop, afraid someone might hear. Even humming felt like breaking the rules now. The worst part was walking past the piano every single day. It sat there in the main hall like a beautiful, silent monument to everything she had lost. Mother Superior Agnes had ordered it to be covered with a white sheet, but Sister Catherine could still see its shape underneath the curved edges, the long wooden legs, the bench where she used to sit for hours. Sometimes when she was cleaning the hall, she would find herself standing next to it, staring at the covered keys. Her fingers would twitch, remembering the feel of ivory beneath her touch. She would imagine pulling away the sheet and sitting down to play, just once, just for a moment. but she never did. The fear of Mother Superior Annis's anger was too strong. The other nuns had stopped talking about music altogether. In the early days after the ban, Sister Anne would sometimes whisper about how much she missed the evening concerts. Sister Mary would hum quietly while doing her embroidery, but gradually, even these small rebellions had faded away. It was as if Mother Superior Agnes had succeeded in erasing music from their lives completely, or so it seemed. Sister Catherine had always been the type of person who followed rules. Even as a child, she had been the good daughter, the obedient student, the quiet girl who never caused trouble. When she entered the convent, she had embraced the discipline and structure. She found peace in knowing exactly what was expected of her. But now, for the first time in her life, she was beginning to understand what it meant to truly struggle with temptation. It started small. During her late-night prayers in the chapel, she would find her mind wandering to the piano in the next room. She would imagine herself getting up, walking over to it, and playing just one note. Just to hear that beautiful sound again at first. She pushed these thoughts away, telling herself they were sinful distractions from prayer. But as the weeks went by, the urge grew stronger. One particularly difficult evening in March, Sister Catherine knelt in the chapel for her usual hour of prayer. The other nuns had gone to bed, and she was alone with her thoughts and the flickering candles. She tried to focus on her prayers, but her arthritic hands were aching from a day spent scrubbing floors. And all she could think about was how different. This pain was from the good ache she used to feel after hours of practice. Her fingers used to hurt from creating beauty. Now they hurt from endless, meaningless labor. Without realizing what she was doing, she found herself standing up. Her feet carried her out of the chapel and into the main hall, where the piano waited in the darkness. The moonlight streaming through the tall windows cast strange shadows across the white sheet that covered it. Sister Catherine stood there for what felt like hours, just looking at it. Her heart was pounding so hard, she was sure the other nuns would hear it from their rooms upstairs. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and touched the corner of the white sheet. The fabric was soft under her trembling fingers. She could feel the solid wood of the piano beneath it, waiting patiently for someone to bring it back to life. But she couldn't. She just couldn't. She pulled her hand back and returned to her room, more frustrated than ever. This became her new routine. Evening prayers, she would find herself drawn to the piano like a moth to a flame. She would stand there in the darkness, fighting the urge to pull away the sheet and touch the keys. The temptation was becoming stronger every night, Sister Anne noticed the change in her friend. "You look tired," she said one morning as they worked together in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the other nuns. "I'm not sleeping well," Sister Catherine admitted, not mentioning that she was spending hours each night standing in the hall, staring at the covered piano. "None of us are," Sister Anne sighed. "This place feels so different now, so quiet. Not the good kind of quiet that comes from peace, but the empty kind." Sister Catherine nodded, grateful that someone else understood. But even to her closest friend, she couldn't admit how desperately she wanted to play again. How the need for music was eating away at her like hunger. The breaking point came on a cold April night when Sister Catherine couldn't sleep at all. She had tossed and turned for hours, her mind playing the same melody over and over. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major was one of her favorite pieces, one she had played hundreds of times in her previous life. Finally, she gave up trying to sleep and went to the chapel to pray. But even there, the music wouldn't leave her alone. The melody seemed to echo off the stone walls, calling to her. Before she knew what she was doing, she was walking toward the main hall again. But this time was different. This time her hands moved without permission from her brain. She pulled the white sheet away from the piano. There it was, in all its black and gleaming glory. The Steinway grand piano that had been her companion for so many years. Even in the dim moonlight, it was beautiful. Sister Catherine sat down on the bench, her hands shaking. She positioned her fingers over the keys just like she had done thousands of times before, but she didn't press down. She couldn't. The fear was too strong. She sat there for several minutes, her fingers hovering over the keyboard like a pianist's ghost. She could almost hear the music, almost feel the keys responding to her touch. But the silence remained unbroken. Finally, overcome by a need so powerful it felt like drowning, Sister Catherine pressed down on middle C. The single note rang out in the silent hall like a bell. Pure, clear, perfect. It seemed to hang in the air forever, filling every corner of the room with sound. And in that moment, Sister Catherine broke down completely. 3 years of suppressed music, 3 years of silence. 3 years of denying the most fundamental part of herself. It all came pouring out in tears that she couldn't control. She cried for the concerts she would never give, for the students she would never teach, for the joy she had brought to her sister nuns that was now forbidden. She cried for the young woman who had sacrificed her career for God, only to have that sacrifice seem meaningless. But most of all, she cried because that single note, that one beautiful, perfect note, reminded her of who she really was underneath all the rules and restrictions. She always had been, and she always would be, no matter what anyone said. The sound of footsteps on the stone floor made her freeze. Someone was coming. Sister Catherine quickly wiped her tears and stood up from the piano bench, her heart racing. She grabbed the white sheet and threw it back over the piano, but she knew she was too late. The footsteps were getting closer. Mother Superior Agnes appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of cold anger. She was wearing her nightgown and robe, but somehow she managed to look just as intimidating as she did during the day. "Sister Catherine," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife, "what exactly do you think you're doing?" The punishment was worse than Sister Catherine had imagined. Mother Superior Agnes didn't shout or scream. Instead, she spoke in a voice so cold it made the April night feel warm. "You'll spend the next week in solitary reflection," she had said that night, her eyes never leaving Sister Catherine's face. No meals with the other sisters, no participation in group prayers, no leaving your cell except for the most basic necessities. But the isolation wasn't just about being alone. It was about the silence. It's a complete, total silence that filled Sister Catherine's small room like thick mud. For 7 days and 7 nights, she sat on her narrow bed, staring at the bare walls. With nothing but her thoughts for company, the other nuns brought her simple meals: bread, water, thin soup. But they weren't allowed to speak to her. Sister Anne would leave the tray by her door with tears in her eyes, but she never said a word. The rules were the rules. During those 7 days, Sister Catherine thought she might actually lose her mind. The melody from that single note, middle C, played over and over in her head like a broken record. She found herself pressing her finger against the wooden bed frame, trying to recreate the feeling of touching a piano key. When the week was over, she emerged from her cell looking like a ghost. Her hair had grown grayer, her face more lined, her hands shakier than before. The other nuns looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and fear. If Sister Catherine, the most obedient, rule-following nun in the convent, could be punished so severely, what might happen to them? The next few months passed in a blur of endless work and careful silence. Sister Catherine scrubbed floors until her knees bled. She tended the vegetable garden until her back ached. She washed dishes until her hands were raw and cracked. All without a single note of music to comfort her. Mother Superior Agnes watched, her constantly waiting for any sign of rebellion. But Sister Catherine had learned her lesson. She kept her eyes down, her mouth shut, and her hands busy with work that had nothing to do with music. The piano remained in the main hall, covered by its white sheet like a sleeping giant. Sometimes Sister Catherine would catch other nuns glancing at it longingly, but no one dared to even get close to it anymore. It seemed like the music had been erased from their lives forever. Then, early September, everything changed. Bishop Williams arrived on a Tuesday morning in a black car that looked far too fancy for their simple convent. He was a kind-faced man in his 60s who had always been supportive of the nuns and their work in the community. Sister Catherine remembered him from the old days when he would sometimes attend their evening concerts with a smile on his face. Mother Superior Agnes greeted him with her usual stern politeness, but Sister Catherine could see she was nervous. Bishops didn't usually make surprise visits unless something important was happening. The nuns were called to gather in the main hall, the same hall where the covered piano sat like an elephant in the room. Bishop Williams stood before them, his hands clasped behind his back, looking more serious than Sister Catherine had ever seen him. "Sisters," he began, his voice echoing off the stone walls, "I come to you today with both an opportunity and a challenge." The nuns exchanged glances. Mother Superior Agnes stood at the front, her face unreadable. "As you know," the bishop continued, "our community has been struggling with the growing problem of homelessness. Families are living in their cars. Veterans are sleeping on park benches. Children are going to bed hungry." Sister Catherine felt her heart clench. Even though she spent most of her time inside the convent walls, she had heard about the troubles in town. The economic downturn had hit their small community hard. "The diocese has decided to organize a charity fundraiser," Bishop Williams announced. "A special evening to raise money for a new homeless shelter. We're hoping to raise enough to house and feed 50 families through the winter." The nuns nodded approvingly. This was exactly the kind of work they supported. "The event will be held here, in your main hall," the bishop said, gesturing around the room. "We'll invite wealthy donors from across the region. Local business owners, government officials, anyone who might be willing to open their hearts and their wallets for this cause." Sister Catherine could see Mother Superior Agnes calculating in her head. Hosting such an important event would bring prestige to the convent. It might even bring in donations for their own needs. Of course, Bishop Williams continued, "An event like this needs to be special, memorable. We need something that will touch people's hearts and inspire them to give generously." He paused, and Sister Catherine noticed he was looking directly at the covered piano. "I had planned to arrange for musical entertainment. There's a young man, Timothy Chen, who recently graduated from the State Conservatory, a brilliant pianist. He agreed to perform for free as his contribution to the cause." Sister Catherine's heart began to race. Music. There was going to be music in their hall again. However, the bishop said, and his voice carried a note of worry, "Young Timothy has fallen seriously ill with pneumonia. He's been hospitalized and won't be able to perform." The silence in the room was deafening. Sister Catherine could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. "The event is in 3 days," Bishop Williams continued. "We've already sent out invitations. We've promised an evening of beautiful music to inspire generosity. But now," he trailed off, looking around the room desperately. "Is there anyone here who might be able to help us?" he asked. "Anyone who could provide musical entertainment for such an important cause?" The silence stretched on. Mother Superior Agnes stood frozen, her mouth slightly open. The other nuns looked at their feet, afraid to speak, but slowly, very slowly. Every pair of eyes in the room turned towards Sister Catherine. She felt like she was going to faint. After 3 years of silence, after punishment and isolation, after being told that music was worldly and sinful, suddenly she was being looked at as the solution to their problem. Bishop Williams followed their gaze, and his face lit up with recognition. "Sister Catherine," he exclaimed, "I remember you. You used to play the most beautiful concerts. Your Chopin was absolutely magnificent." Sister Catherine felt her cheeks burn red. She couldn't look at Mother Superior Agnes, couldn't bear to see the anger that must be building in her superior's face. "Sister Catherine," the bishop continued, walking toward her with hope in his eyes, "would you be willing to help us? Would you play for the homeless families? For the children who need shelter?" The question hung in the air like incense. Sister Catherine stood there, trembling, knowing that her answer would change everything. She wanted to say yes so badly it physically hurt. The thought of sitting at a piano again, of feeling the keys beneath her fingers, of bringing music back into the world, was like being offered water after years in the desert. But she also knew what it would mean. She would be directly defying Mother Superior Agnes's ban on music. She would be risking even worse punishment than before. She might even be asked to leave the convent entirely. She glanced at Mother Superior Agnes, expecting to see fury. Instead, she saw something she had never seen before: uncertainty. Her superior was trapped between her strict rules and the needs of the community they served. The bishop was waiting for an answer. The other nuns were holding their breath. Even the covered piano seemed to be listening. Sister Catherine opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her whole life, her faith, her future, everything balanced on what she would say next. Finally, Mother Superior Agnes stepped forward. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she spoke. "The homeless families," she said slowly, as if each word was being pulled from her against her will. "The children who need shelter." She looked directly at Sister Catherine, and for just a moment her stern mask slipped away. Underneath, Sister Catherine saw not an enemy, but a woman struggling between duty and compassion. "Sister Catherine," Mother Superior Agnes said, her voice stronger now, "you may play for the fundraiser." The words hit Sister Catherine like lightning. After 3 years of silence, she was going to play again. She was going to make music again. But as the initial joy faded, a new fear crept in. What if she had forgotten how? What if her fingers were too stiff, too old, too out of practice? If she sat down at that piano and nothing came out but silence? In 3 days, she would find out. The 3 days before the fundraiser passed like a strange dream. Sister Catherine barely slept, barely ate, and could hardly focus on her daily duties. Her mind was spinning with a mixture of excitement and pure terror. On the first day after getting permission, she had walked to the piano and carefully pulled away the white sheet. Underneath, the black Steinway looked exactly the same as it had 3 years ago. But somehow it felt like meeting an old friend after a long separation. She had run her trembling fingers along the smooth wood, not quite ready to sit down and play. Sister Anne found her there, just standing next to the piano, like she was afraid it might disappear. "Are you going to practice?" Sister Anne whispered, glancing around to make sure Mother Superior Agnes wasn't nearby. "I don't know if I remember how," Sister Catherine admitted, her voice barely audible. "What if I sit down and nothing happens? What if I've forgotten everything?" Sister Anne smiled, gently. "It's like riding a bicycle," she said. "You never really forget." But Sister Catherine wasn't so sure. Her fingers felt stiff and clumsy. Her back ached from years of manual labor instead of sitting properly at a piano bench. Even her breathing felt wrong. She used to breathe with the music. But now she felt like she was gasping for air. On the second day, she finally sat down at the piano bench. The familiar feel of the cushioned seat brought back a flood of memories, but when she placed her hands on the keys, they felt foreign under her touch. She pressed down on middle C, the same note that had gotten her in so much trouble months ago. The sound was perfect, pure, exactly as she remembered. But when she tried to play a simple scale, her fingers stumbled. They moved too slowly, hit wrong keys, felt heavy and awkward. Panic set in. What had she agreed to? How could she possibly perform for important people when she could barely play a basic scale? She spent the rest of that day practicing scales, trying to remember the muscle memory that had once been as natural as breathing. Slowly, very slowly, her fingers began to remember their old patterns. But it wasn't easy, and it wasn't pretty. Sister Mary found her that evening, still sitting at the piano, her hands cramped and sore from hours of practice. "You sound beautiful, Sister," Mary said, though they both knew it wasn't true yet. "I sound rusty," Sister Catherine replied with a sad smile. "Like an old car trying to start after sitting in a garage for years." "But you're starting," Sister Mary pointed out. "That's what matters." By the third day, the day of the fundraiser, Sister Catherine felt slightly more confident but still terrified. She had managed to play through a few simple pieces. Nothing too complicated, nothing that required the lightning-fast fingerwork she had once been famous for. She had settled on playing some gentle hymns, and maybe one classical piece that she knew by heart. The main hall had been transformed for the evening. The nuns had cleaned every surface until it gleamed. They had arranged chairs in neat rows facing the piano. Candles flickered on tables around the room, creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere. As the sun began to set, cars started arriving in the gravel driveway. Expensive cars, the kind that Sister Catherine hadn't seen since her days at the conservatory. Through the tall windows, she could see well-dressed people walking toward the convent entrance. Mayor Johnson arrived first, followed by the owner of the largest factory in town. Then came Dr. Peterson, who ran the biggest medical practice in the county. Sister Catherine recognized some faces from newspaper photos, wealthy business owners, local politicians, people who had the power to make or break the fundraisers. Success. Bishop Williams greeted each guest personally, explaining the urgent need for the homeless shelter and thanking them for their generosity. But Sister Catherine could see him glancing nervously toward the piano. Everything depended on the music touching these people's hearts. As the hall filled with nearly 60 guests, Sister Catherine hid in the small room behind the kitchen, trying to calm her racing heart. She could hear the buzz of conversation, the clink of wine glasses, the polite laughter of people being social for a good cause. Mother Superior Agnes found her there, looking more nervous than Sister Catherine had ever seen her. "Sister Catherine," she said quietly, "I want you to know that She paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily to her. "I may have been wrong," she continued finally. "About the music, about your gift. God gave you this talent, perhaps He meant for you to use it." It was the closest thing to an apology that Sister Catherine would ever get from her strict superior, and it meant more to her than any standing ovation ever could. "Thank you, Mother," she whispered. Bishop Williams appeared in the doorway. "Sister Catherine, it's time." Her legs felt like water as she walked into the main hall. The conversation died down as people noticed the elderly nun in her simple black habit making her way to the piano. Some guests looked curious, others seemed politely confused. A few checked their phones, probably wondering when the real entertainment would begin. Sister Catherine sat down at the piano bench and adjusted her position. The keys looked up at her like old friends, but her hands were shaking so badly, she wasn't sure she could hit the right notes. She looked out at the audience and saw faces that ranged from interested to skeptical to downright doubtful. These were sophisticated people used to professional entertainment. What was this old nun going to play for them? Bishop Williams stepped forward to introduce her, but Sister Catherine barely heard his words. Her heart was pounding so loud it seemed to echo off the walls. She could see Mother Superior Agnes standing at the back of the room, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Then Bishop Williams finished speaking, and the room fell completely silent. This was it, the moment she had been dreading and anticipating. For 3 days? 3 years? Her entire life. Sister Catherine placed her trembling fingers on the keys and closed her eyes. For a moment, she let herself remember what it felt like to truly play, not just hit the right notes, but to let the music flow through her like a river. When she opened her eyes, something had changed. The fear was still there, but it was joined by something else, a deep, quiet confidence that came from somewhere beyond her conscious mind. She had originally planned to start with a simple hymn, something safe and predictable. But as her fingers found their positions on the keyboard, she realized that safe wasn't what these people needed to hear. Safe wouldn't open their hearts to homeless families sleeping in cars. Instead, she began to play Chopin's Ballade No. 1. In G minor, one of the most difficult and emotionally powerful pieces in the classical repertoire, it was a piece that demanded everything from a pianist's technical skill, emotional depth, physical endurance, and absolute musical maturity. It was also the piece she had been practicing in secret. Late at night in her cell, playing it over and over in her mind for 3 long years, the first notes rang out in the silent hall like drops of pure gold. Sister Catherine felt her fingers remember exactly what they were supposed to do, felt the music begin to flow through her hands and into the room. But this wasn't just the technical perfection she had once been known for. This was something deeper, richer, more profound. This was music that had been aged in silence, seasoned with suffering and refined by years of longing. The audience, who had been politely waiting for a simple performance to get through, suddenly found themselves witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't an old nun playing piano. This was a master musician pouring her soul out through her fingertips as the complex melodies filled the hall. Sister Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in years, complete and total freedom. For these precious minutes, she wasn't bound by rules or restrictions or expectations. She was simply a conduit for the music that had been trapped inside her for so long, and the music that came out was nothing short of miraculous. The music that flowed from Sister Catherine's fingers was unlike anything the audience had ever heard. It wasn't just technically perfect, though. It was that too. Every note was precisely placed, every phrase perfectly shaped, every dynamic change executed with the skill of a master. But there was something more, something that went beyond technical ability. This was music that told a story. The story of a young woman who had given up everything for her faith. The story of years spent in joyful service, playing evening concerts for her sister nuns. The story of sudden silence, of punishment, of dreams locked away in the darkness of a forbidden room. And now, it's the story of resurrection, as the Chopin Ballade unfolded. The wealthy guests found themselves leaning forward in their chairs. Conversations that had been buzzing in the back of their minds fell completely silent. Phones that had been buzzing with messages were forgotten in jacket pockets. Dr. Peterson, who had come to the fundraiser more out of obligation than genuine interest, felt tears forming in his eyes. He was a practical man, a surgeon who dealt in facts and medical procedures. But somehow, this music was reaching a part of him that he had forgotten existed. Mayor Johnson, who had been mentally rehearsing the short speech he would give about the homeless shelter, found himself completely captivated. He had heard professional pianists before the city hosted a classical music festival every summer, but none of them had ever moved him like this. Even the younger guests, who usually preferred pop music and had only come because their parents dragged them along, sat mesmerized. There was something in Sister Catherine's playing that spoke to everyone, regardless of age or musical taste. The music built and swirled around the room like a living thing. Sister Catherine's fingers danced across the keys with a grace that seemed impossible for a 71-year-old woman who hadn't played in years. Her back straightened as she played, her face transformed from nervous uncertainty to pure joy. This was who she really was. Not Sister Catherine the floor scrubber or Sister Catherine the rule breaker. This was Sister Catherine the musician, the artist, the woman whose gift had been given by God to share with the world. In the back of the room, Mother Superior Agnes stood with tears streaming down her face. For the first time in her life, she truly understood what she had tried to take away. This wasn't worldly entertainment or sinful distraction. This was prayer in its purest form. Sister Anne and Sister Mary clutched each other's hands, remembering all those beautiful evenings when music had filled their simple lives with magic. They had missed this so much, and now it was back. It's more powerful than ever. As the piece reached its climactic final section, Sister Catherine threw herself into the music with complete abandon. Her fingers flew across the keys, her whole body moving with the rhythm, her face glowing with an inner light that made her look 20 years younger. The final notes rang out in the hall and then faded into perfect silence. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The music had been so powerful, so unexpected, so completely overwhelming that the audience sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just experienced. Then, slowly, Dr. Peterson began to clap. His applause was joined by Mayor Johnson, then by the factory owner, then by everyone else in the room. But this wasn't polite, obligatory applause. This was the kind of thunderous ovation usually reserved for the world's greatest concert halls. People jumped to their feet, many wiping tears from their eyes. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" Another person called out, "Magnificent!" The applause went on and on. Echoing off the stone walls of the old convent, Sister Catherine sat at the piano bench, her hands still resting on the keys, looking dazed and overwhelmed. She had forgotten what it felt like to move an audience like this. She had forgotten the incredible connection that could exist between a musician and listeners when everything came together perfectly. But in the third row, something else was happening that would change everything. Janet Miller, a local business owner who had brought her teenage daughter to the fundraiser, had been recording the performance on her phone. She wasn't sure why. Maybe she wanted to show her music teacher friends. Or maybe she just wanted to remember this incredible moment. As the applause continued, Janet quickly uploaded the video to her social media account with a simple caption. 71-year-old nun who hasn't played piano in years just gave the performance of a lifetime. This is what pure talent looks like. She hit post and put her phone away, not thinking much about it. She was too busy being amazed by what she had just witnessed. But within minutes, something extraordinary began to happen. Janet's friends started sharing the video. Then their friends shared it. Then complete strangers started sharing it. The video began spreading across the internet like wildfire. It's moving from one social media platform to another. By the time the fundraiser ended that night with enough money raised to not just build the homeless shelter, but to operate it for 2 full years, the video had been viewed 10,000 times by morning. It had reached 100,000 views. By noon the next day, it had passed 1 million. Sister Catherine woke up the morning after the fundraiser feeling exhausted, but happy. She had slept better than she had in years, her dreams filled with music, instead of the usual anxiety and silence. She was in the kitchen helping to prepare breakfast when Sister Anne came running in, her face flushed with excitement.
Sister Catherine?
She gasped, "You need to come see this right now."
Ow! What's wrong?
Sister Catherine asked, alarmed by her friend's tone. "Nothing's wrong," Sister Anne said, grabbing her hand. "Everything's wonderful, but you won't believe what's happening." They rushed to Mother Superior Agnes's office, where a small computer sat on the desk, the convent's only connection to the outside world. A group of nuns had gathered around the screen, all talking at once. "Look at this," Sister Mary said, pointing at the computer. "Look how many people have watched you play." Sister Catherine stared at the screen in confusion. There was a video of her performance from the night before. Below it was a number that seemed impossible: 2,847,392 views. "I don't understand," she said. "What does this mean?" "It means the whole world is watching you," Mother Superior Agnes said quietly. She had been standing behind them, reading the comments that were pouring in from around the globe. The comments were incredible. People from Japan, Brazil, Germany, Australia, all sharing how much the performance had moved them. Many were musicians themselves, expressing amazement at Sister Catherine's skill and emotional depth. "This is impossible," Sister Catherine whispered. "I'm just an old nun. I just played one song." But it wasn't just one song anymore. News websites had picked up the story. Television stations were calling, asking for interviews. A major record label had already sent an email asking if Sister Catherine would be interested in making an album. Within a week, the video had been viewed over 50 million times. Sister Catherine's story had been featured on national news programs and in newspapers around the world. The shy elderly nun who had been forced into silence had become an international sensation. Carnegie Hall sent a formal invitation for her to perform. The Sydney Opera House offered to fly her to Australia. Classical music lovers who had never heard of their small convent were sending donations from every continent. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from other musicians who had been forced to give up their gifts for various reasons. Elderly pianists in nursing homes, former violinists with arthritis, singers who had lost their voices, all reaching out to say that Sister Catherine's story had inspired them to try again. The white sheet that had covered the piano for 3 years was now permanently stored away. Every evening, the main hall once again filled with music as Sister Catherine played for her sister nuns and for the local children who came to the new music program she had started. Mother Superior Agnes had not only lifted the ban on music, she had embraced it completely. "Perhaps," she said to Sister Catherine one evening, as beautiful melodies filled the air, "God's gifts are meant to be shared, not hidden." Sister Catherine smiled as her fingers moved across the keys, playing a gentle lullaby for the youngest students in her program. She had learned that it's never too late for a resurrection, never too late for a gift to be rediscovered, and never too late for music to change the world.